This is a calm Italian bedtime story. Let your eyes close and simply listen. After midnight, Rome does not become silent. It becomes selective. The large sounds withdraw first. Engines thin out. Footsteps lose their urgency. Voices stop traveling far enough to matter. What remains is not absence, but permission. Water takes advantage of this. A fountain begins to reveal itself, not by growing louder, but by no longer competing. A thin stream slips over stone that has been worn smooth by centuries of hands that never meant to touch it. The sound is not constant. It hesitates. It pauses. Then it continues, as if listening to the space around it before deciding how much to say. The stone basin holds the water without reflecting it fully. Moonlight touches only the highest edge, leaving the rest to exist by sound alone. This fountain has spoken all day, but it has only been heard now. A drop falls slightly off rhythm, not an error, a variation. Somewhere inside the structure, water chooses a different path than it did earlier. Not dramatically, just enough to change the tone. Rome is full of these decisions. A trickle slides along a carved groove that once had a purpose. Now, it simply carries sound. The air around the fountain is cooler than the street that surrounds it. Not colder, more settled. Stone releases the heat of the day slowly here. The water accepts it and gives back calm. If you stand still long enough, you notice that the fountain does not repeat itself. It cycles. It remembers. Then it shifts. A small gurgle forms beneath the surface, hidden from sight. It does not ask for attention. It waits until the city has stepped far enough away. A pigeon stirs somewhere high above, then settles again. The fountain does not react. This is not performance. This is continuation. The basin has held water through empires that believed they would last forever, through centuries that argued with themselves, through nights when no one passed, and nights when no one slept. The fountain learned early that its role was not to impress, but to remain. A ripple moves outward and disappears against stone that has memorized its shape. The sound deepens briefly, then softens again. Rome does not breathe evenly. It breathes in layers, and at this hour, water carries the deepest one. This water learned its patience from someone, not from emperors, not from architects whose names were carved into stone and then forgotten, from women who came here at night, not all at once, not ceremonially. Women who arrived when the city loosened its grip on the day, when children were already asleep, when kitchens had cooled just enough to leave the windows open. She would stop near the fountain without announcing herself, not to fetch water, not to pray, just to stand close enough for the sound to recognize her. Her hands knew stone before they knew paper. They rested on the basin edge without pressure, fingers finding the same smooth indentation every time, the place where centuries of touch had quietly agreed. She did not look at the water directly. She listened. Roman women learned early that water speaks better when it is not watched. A cloth would be folded once over her arm, not for drying, for habit, the kind of habit that outlives its original reason. She had come here before dawn many times in her life, before ovens warmed, before doors opened, before the city decided what it needed to be that day. Sometimes she hummed, not a song with words, not a melody meant to be remembered, just a line that followed the water for a moment, then let it go. The fountain never answered the same way twice. Some nights, the sound was hollow, echoing deeper than expected. Other nights, it stayed close to the surface, light and restrained. She adjusted nothing. Roman women did not correct the night. They observed it. She knew which fountains spoke louder after rain, which ones changed tone in summer, which ones fell almost silent when the moon was high and full. This knowledge was never written down. It passed through gestures, through the way a hand paused before leaving, through the way a foot shifted on stone before turning back. Children learned it without instruction. A daughter once stood beside her, barely tall enough to see into the basin. The child reached toward the water and was stopped gently, not with words, but with a hand resting on her wrist. Listen first. That was the lesson. The fountain did not belong to anyone, but it recognized certain presences. It softened when they arrived. Even now, long after those footsteps have faded, the water still behaves as if someone might return. A ripple slows, a gurgle settles. The fountain remembers being heard properly, not admired, not documented, heard. And the city, in its quieter hours, allows this memory to surface. You do not move with intention. There is no route, no list, no idea of how many fountains remain. You simply allow the sound you are near to finish saying what it needs to say before another one begins. The first fountain fades, not because you leave it, but because the city introduces something else. A footstep far away, a swallow of water settling inside stone. The subtle change in echo as the street narrows. Rome at this hour does not guide you with sight. It guides you with distance. You follow where the sound grows thinner, then fuller again. Stone beneath your feet holds the warmth of the day in patches. Some slabs release it quickly, others keep it longer, like a secret. Your steps adjust without thought, not faster, not slower, just quieter. The next fountain is smaller. It does not announce itself. You hear it only when you are already close. A soft internal conversation between water and stone. This one does not splash, it breathes. Water slips from a narrow lip and disappears immediately, as if it does not wish to be noticed. Someone once repaired this fountain carefully, not beautifully, correctly. The sound reflects that decision. You pause, not because you are tired, but because pausing feels like the right response. A hand rests briefly against the wall beside you. The stone is smooth, where palms have passed for generations, polished by waiting. This fountain has watched centuries of people pass without stopping. It has learned not to mind. When you move again, the sound follows for a few steps, then releases you. Rome allows this. Further on, another fountain speaks more openly. This one spills into a shallow basin. The water meets itself and separates again, never repeating the same meeting twice. Here, the sound spreads wider. It touches the walls, the ground, the undersides of balconies where laundry once hung and will hang again. You notice how each fountain carries its own shape of silence around it. Some silence is tight, contained. Other silence expands outward, as if inviting you to stay longer than planned. You do not choose which kind you prefer. Preference belongs to daylight. At night, you accept. A distant bell marks time somewhere else in the city, not near enough to interfere, not far enough to disappear. It does not count the hours. It reminds the water that time is still moving. You pass beneath an arch where sound changes suddenly. The fountain you left behind becomes rounder, softer, then vanishes completely. Another replaces it without warning. This one is older than it looks. You can hear it in the way the water hesitates before falling, as if measuring memory instead of distance. The basin edge bears chips that were never repaired. They were learned instead. People adjusted their hands around them. The water adjusted its fall. Everything found a way to continue without perfection. You think briefly of how many nights like this have existed here. Nights when Rome was louder. Nights when it was quieter. Nights when names meant something different. The fountains outlasted all of it by doing nothing more than continuing. You notice that your breathing has changed. Not deeper, not slower, more even. It matches the rhythm of water that is not trying to impress. Another fountain appears at the end of a narrow street. You hear it before you see it, but when you do see it, it surprises you. It is not large, not ornate, just present. The water emerges from stone, shaped by hands long gone, falls a short distance, and settles immediately. This fountain does not echo. It absorbs. The sound stays close to itself, as if meant only for those who arrive quietly enough. You stay longer here, no reason, just agreement. The city does not rush you. Somewhere above, a window closes softly, not slammed, not hurried. Someone else is finishing their night. You feel briefly connected, then released. The journey continues without direction. One fountain gives way to another, each carrying a slightly different weight. Some sound like memory, others like forgetting. Some are steady, others falter for a moment before finding themselves again. You begin to understand that this is not a walk through space. It is a walk through variations of the same breath. Rome breathes through water at night because stone listens better when the streets are empty. Eventually, you stop noticing when one fountain ends and another begins. The transitions soften. Sound becomes continuous, like a single sentence spoken by many mouths. You no longer try to identify where you are. The fountains do not need to be named, to be understood. They are not landmarks now. They are companions. And as you continue moving, slowly, without destination, the city rearranges itself around the sound of water until the journey feels less like going somewhere and more like being carried. There is a moment when Rome does not fall asleep. It loosens. You feel it not through silence, but through what stops insisting. The last echo of footsteps fades without being replaced. The space between sounds grows wider, then wider again, until nothing feels crowded anymore. The fountains notice this before you do. Their voices do not change in volume. They change in confidence. Water no longer has to compete. It speaks in its natural register, low, steady, unhurried. The city has stopped listening outward. It has turned inward. Streetlights remain, but they soften. Not dimmer, less assertive. They stop defining edges and begin to accept shadow as part of the shape. You pass a fountain that once stood at the center of something important. You can tell because the space around it is wider than it needs to be. Here, the water sounds different. It carries history, without reciting it. This fountain has seen nights when sleep was rare, nights when people stayed awake out of worry, or hope, or hunger. Tonight, it is allowed to be simple. The basin holds the water without ceremony, no splashing, no excess, just continuation. You stand still long enough to hear how the sound settles after itself. Not the fall, not the impact, the moment after. That pause is where the city sleeps. Rome does not go unconscious. It enters a lighter state. Windows stay open. Doors remain unlocked where they have always remained unlocked. Keys turn only once. People trust the city at this hour because the city has learned how to hold them. You walk past a fountain tucked into a wall, so modest it feels like an apology. Its water barely moves. It slips. This fountain was never meant to be admired. It was meant to be useful enough to last centuries. You think briefly of hands that once cupped water here. Not ceremonially, practically, the thought passes without attaching itself. Memory at night does not cling. It drifts. Somewhere, far away, a motor hums and then stops. The city exhales again. The fountains fill the space left behind. They do not rush to occupy it. They allow it to remain open. You notice now that your steps are no longer distinct. They merge into the ground. Stone accepts them without echo. The city has reached its lowest volume. This is the hour that belongs to no one in particular. Not workers, not insomniacs, not wanderers, just the city itself. You arrive at a fountain that sounds almost like breathing, not rhythmic, not measured, alive. Water rises, falls, hesitates, adjusts, as if responding to something you cannot hear. This fountain has learned the pace of night by listening to it for hundreds of years. It does not need you to stay. It does not mind if you do. You remain anyway. Time here stretches without effort. Minutes lose their edges. The sound of water becomes less something you hear and more something you are inside. Your thoughts loosen. They do not disappear. They simply stop lining up. Rome sleeps like this, not by shutting down, but by allowing everything unnecessary to drift away. The fountains continue. They will continue even when you leave. They continued before you arrived. And in this shared quiet, you understand something without needing to name it. The city is not empty now. It is held by stone, held by water, held by the trust that morning will come later and does not need to be prepared for yet. The night deepens one last time, not darker, quieter, and the fountains, steady, patient, remain awake so everything else can rest. More Italian bedtime stories coming very soon. If you enjoyed this moment of calm, subscribe and like the video for more gentle storytelling. More Italian bedtime stories coming very soon. If you enjoyed this moment of calm, subscribe and like the video for more gentle storytelling.